Hey, everybody. Welcome to the June edition of Dinner with the Devs. This is the visual novel edition. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't already, make sure that you have your notifications on for anything Schell Games, a part of the channel. Make sure you subscribe. We are really happy to have a couple folks from the Schell Games marketing team. We have Jesse here, and once again, he'll introduce himself if you're unfamiliar who he is, and Misha will introduce themselves as well. So before we get started, we are going to be taking questions from the live chat. So if you have any comments about what we're talking about, any questions about the conversation, feel free to put it in the live chat, and our live chat moderator, Jill Shuley, our Senior Director of Marketing, will be able to translate those comments and questions and put them to me for us to talk about. So, along with visual novels and choice-based narrative games, we're going to be talking about Mission is Complicated. We're going to talk about some of the other games that some of our developers have been a part of that aren't necessarily Schell Games products. So we like talking about those as well. But let's get started. So I'm Dwayne Waite Jr., part of the Schell Games marketing team. And let's start with Adam, then Misha, then Jess.
Hi, everybody. My name is Adam, and I am also a part of the marketing team. Kind of a new addition here, so excited to be a part of this.
Misha?
Hello, I'm Misha Vilichansky. I am a mostly engineer here at Schell Games, but occasional writer. I also write novels and short stories on my own time. I was the lead writer and director on Mission is Complicated.
Cool. And hey, I'm Jesse Schell, CEO at Schell Games.
Cool. And like I said, Jill Shuley is our live chat moderator, and then the person operating the strings behind the technology is Mac, our web ops manager, and he is our tech producer for the Dinner with the Devs. So we definitely appreciate him being on. If it wasn't him, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So first, to get the conversation rolling, I'd like to pull to the audience of what we consider a visual novel. What exactly makes a visual novel? How do we turn a visual novel into a game or experience? So I'd like to get your thoughts on that. So if we want to start with Misha, what in your definition, or what you would consider a visual novel being?
So obviously whenever you start trying to kind of separate games into little categories, you're always going to have fuzziness at the edges. So if a game calls itself a visual novel, obviously, sure, it's a visual novel. I think generally if I see a visual novel tag or I'm looking in the genre, I'm thinking this game is mostly going to be text-based, and one of the primary kind of game mechanics I'm going to be using is making some kind of dialogue choices, choosing dialogue or choosing how I interact with characters. So I'm expecting a lot of text, a lot of still art, and that might be and choices, and that might be all, right? Like now some of that is not necessary. Like you don't really have to have choices, and your choices don't have to be meaningful for it to be a visual novel, because it can just be text and images. I think text and lots of text and images is really probably the baseline. If there's no images, then it's probably just a novel.
Mike, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Your take. Before we worked on Mission It's Complicated, like the phrase visual novel wasn't something I'd really encountered very much. When I talk to old timers who've written, text adventures and that kind of thing, because in a lot of ways, visual novels are in the realm of graphical text adventures, right? I'm talking to them and they're like, "What is this? I've never heard of this." When do you think this term really appeared? And where did it come from and why? Why do you think it's here now?
Boy, I sure don't know the answer to a lot of those questions. I know that probably in the last 5 years is when I started seeing them really heavily on Steam.
Yeah.
I know that they mostly came from the Asian market, there where they were very popular for a much longer period of time. I think it's only fairly recently that kind of non-Asian developers have started making them, or possibly making them and actually getting visibility on them versus making them in kind of obscurity. But I don't know a lot of the history behind them and how they came up, because I found them pretty recently,
Yeah.
and I haven't played that many of them until I made one.
Yeah, it sure is a genre now. There's no doubt about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And phones have obviously helped a lot. People seem to like playing them on phone, reading them on phone. Um,
That's a good point.
yeah, so I think that's helped some of that. But also just in general, I think as in the last kind of 20 years, you've seen more and more Japanese cultural objects kind of having more of a mainstream presence. Like they've always come over, but as things have gone more digital, we've seen them more and more become very mainstream. So I think visual novels are just following on the heels of anime and then manga as things that were sort of niche niche objects that people liked, but in a very kind of small audience, but have grown significantly since then.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense because I know growing up, I talking to Adam before the stream that I wasn't too familiar about the visual novel, genre and for games, but I grew up reading a lot of comic books and trying to turn like a comic book into a graphic novel. Then to your point about mangas and turning mangas and animes into what kind of transpired into this visual novel genre, I think makes a lot of sense. Um, and I think it's cool. So, do you think that the with the rise of different cultures and like you said, just the Japanese culture coming over, and we're seeing more development of these type of things. Do you think that the visual novel genre is catching on? Do you see that this is something that is going to stick around for a while, or it's just something niche that might run for a couple of years and eventually fizzle out?
I certainly don't think they're going to go away, just because they are relatively easy to produce. So they've been embraced by various subcultures, right? Like Vicious Complicated is quite explicitly a queer visual novel with a lot of queer content in it. Um, those communities have very much adopted visual novels as something that's important to them, because it's very easy to talk and discuss and interact with things that are important to these communities in a very inexpensive way, relatively speaking, right? Like it still takes a ton of writing and it still takes a ton of art, but one person who can do art and write can just on their own make a visual novel and even be successful at it. A small team can make a very successful visual novel, and I think that's also why we've seen things like Dream Daddy be some of the first like really big mainstream. Um, it may not be the first. I don't follow genres closely as I might like, but it's certainly the first one that I became very aware of. Like, wow, this is like really blowing up huge. But again, it comes from kind of a subculture that was not getting a lot of attention, and a small team was able to produce something really amazing in a reasonable amount of time for a reasonable amount of money, relatively speaking. So for that reason alone, I don't think it's going to go away. I think there's always going to be a market for, I don't want to make a 3D world. I don't want to build super complex AI. I don't have the algorithms for this. I can't make multiplayer, but I still want to tell a story. Well, what if I just use text and art? Like it's sort of the bare minimum you need to put something on a computer screen or on a phone and have someone have a really good time with it. Just text and art. So yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned that a small team can create some writing and art, but as you probably know, and Jesse, Adam, you guys already know as well, that good writing is hard to do. Like good art is hard. So
yeah, I didn't say it was easy. I just said it was. I said it was cheap.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more about that because it's not just because it's cheap doesn't make it easy to do.
Absolutely not.
So, what are your opinions on what makes reading or like art, like this narrative design, so hard to do? Yeah, let's start with that. Well, is it hard to do, and why do you or do you not think so?
I mean, it's certainly challenging, right? Like, it's probably easier for some people than others. It's not super easy for me. I have worked for a very long time to get where I am. Some people seem to do it effortlessly, so it's always going to depend on the person. Um, I think I think writing of any kind is always going to be challenging for the same reason writing a novel, a short story. You have to know voice, you have to know pacing, you have to have good characters, you have to have a different voice for each character, you have to have some kind of a plot, you have to understand what kind of plots make for interesting reading, you have to understand where you have too much plot, like all that stuff that takes years of writing and reading and practicing to kind of nail down. And there's no right answer to any of it, right? Like in engineering, which is most of my day job, it's like, did it build? Does it run? Is it bug free? Okay, great, it works. Whereas, is this character fun? Like, gosh, that's an impossible question. It's going to be fun for some people and not others. So it's in like any creative task, you're going to have those challenges with it. And then of course, when you're doing it for a kind of in a video game context, now you're making choices. So you're trying to figure out, where are those branches going to be? What kind of philosophy are you going to take to branching? Like, do completely different things happen depending on branches? Do you close, kind of separate the branch out, but then close it back in? How satisfying are the choices? Because you don't want a lot of choices, but then they all feel meaningless. So you're dealing with all of this kind of digital interactive stuff on top of all the stuff that already goes into writing a novel, which is already impossibly hard. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of practice and playtesting and some amount of hubris and confidence. Like, the nice thing about it is that one person can do all that in a year, as opposed to, say, creating a Grand Theft Auto 5, which one person could spend 10 years and never finish that. Though I guess the Dwarf Fortress guys are trying to prove otherwise. That's pretty massive, but it's the difference between this is possible to do but requires 100 people versus this is very, very difficult, but one person who can do it can get it done in a year. It's kind of the difference. So it's like, and I think it's worth saying that just because it's very difficult to get it done well, there's something to be said for an ease of getting it done badly, right? Like building a bad open world game still requires so much effort and so much technical knowledge that it's very hard for someone to go and just fail, right? Because that's how you learn. You go and you fail and you fail and you fail and you start learning. Whereas failing at a visual novel or a regular novel is very, very easy. And that's a good thing, because the more you can try and fail, the more you're going to learn, until eventually you get to the point where now you're doing it well.
Good stuff. And before I get to Jesse about his thoughts on narrative design and why that may or may not be so difficult, Adam, your background is in creative writing. Is that right?
Yeah, it is actually. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess what are your thoughts about translating writing that people would want to read, and maybe adding some of your background and thoughts, because I know so Adam's new to Schell Games, and one of the first games he's picked up and almost completed was Mission is Complicated.
I did actually.
You did complete it.
I did, yeah.
Nice. And so I guess with your creative writing background, I'd love to hear your thoughts about getting people to sit and read and to get immersed in it, to feel a part of it, and how you felt about it. I mean, I know you love the game, so.
I mean, I think one of the big reasons why I finished Mission It's Complicated so quickly is because I fell in love with the characters, and I think that to me is one of the big big draws with writing is when you have characters with such distinct voices and characterization and personality traits. Like, I think when the characters jump off the screen, then you're more compelled to stay on the screen. And so that is a huge thing. And I think that one of the the go-to like pieces of advice is to write what you know, and or like inspire characters based off people that you know and that you interact with. And so like you don't want to tell a story that is something that you don't know or don't have any experience in. I think that personal experiences is definitely something that can help cater to telling an effective story, because you don't know what you don't know. And I think that was something that was handled really well with Missions This Complicated. You could tell that there was a lot of thought and consideration that went into a lot of the experiences, and especially, I mean, like Misha was saying, that it's a queer-based visual novel, and you can certainly tell that the subjects were handled efficiently and very effectively, and I think definitely resonated with me. So I don't know if that answers the question.
I'm blushing.
No, it totally does, Adam. So thank you for that. And so, yeah, I did want to throw it to Jesse about I mean, with your wide design background, of what your thoughts were about getting people to read and enjoy it, and to create a narrative in a game that people would want to continue to go on. Like, how hard or easy in your mind do you think that is to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the reason I had a lot of confidence about this is because of where the inspiration for the project, to jump to that, is we didn't start out and say, hey, let's get in the visual novel business just out of nowhere. It didn't just pop out of nothing. We had worked on a project that was a health application that was designed to be kind of a health coach, helping you eat healthier, and do stress reduction and quit smoking. And we'd spent a couple of years working on this. And part of what we found was really effective was a right way to engage with people with this was kind of simulated texting. And so we developed this little engine where you had this virtual health coach who would send you not actual SMS text during the day, but like the way it interacted in the app was very text-like, and the way you'd respond would be with just little multiple choice answers. Because we found that, because the question we were looking at was, how do you transfer this stuff that traditionally, this stuff would be done through workbooks and things. You'd read a section and ask you to think about things and all that. And translating that into the phone was a question. We realized that the rhythm people are used to on a phone for communicating is the texting rhythm. So we thought, how do we make an app that does that? And so we did, and we had this nice little engine for it. And we started talking about, wouldn't it be cool if we could find a way to make an entertainment game with this? And so, we pulled the team together and said, start exploring this and see if something pops up there. So we didn't actually come at it saying, visual novels. We kind of were like, this texting type interaction works. And the team recognized, like, this thing actually, it's kind of, this is sort of a method of interacting with visual novels. And I do think ours is a little different than a lot of other visual novels because it has this sort of texting foundation in it, right? We originally, when we were starting to make this game, it was going to be a mobile game. And we ended up getting away from it for a couple reasons. One of them was it was not clear how you could monetize a game like this on mobile. And then secondly, as the team thought about it, they're like, we could make this game actually look cooler if it wasn't on mobile. We'd, have the luxury of having a larger screen and some fewer headaches. And so we ended up going for PC first.
Good stuff.
One thing I wanted to build on too with what Adam was saying, characters were definitely a big part of how I always try to get people willing to read, because you definitely have that issue in with a video game people see a lot of text and are like, well, I'm going to play a game. That's not necessarily what I want to do. But maybe a little bit surprisingly, you have the same problem with novels. Like, I love reading, but starting a new novel is like, oh, okay, here we go. Like that first page is going to be like a slog until something in the voice, something in a character like grabs your attention. And you're like, oh, okay, now it's fun. Now I can keep going. So that is certainly what I tried to do.
Yeah. Hey, actually, I'd ask Misha if you wouldn't mind. I know people are always interested. So many people are interested in, how do I get started as a writer? How do I get going? Can you kind of tell your story about, the novels you've written and things that have led up to this, and how you got started with
that? Yeah, sure. I started writing in high school, literally because I went to this little country high school. We had a lit mag that had almost nothing in it. I thought, wow, there's no prose fiction at all. I'll just write something. I read a lot. I started trying to write a short story. It turned out to be the hardest thing I had ever done in my life, and I said, yes, this is what I would like to do with my life. I don't know why I had that reaction, but I did. So I wrote all through college since then. I mostly write fantasy. I mostly write these days for the YA and middle grade market. I did have some novels published back in like the 2012 to 2014 time period. I've written several novels since then that have not been published, so I'm still trying.
How did you get over that gap in terms of first getting published?
I mean, it's basically the same with every novel, right? You finish it, you go find agents that are interested in representing the kind of thing that you wrote. You write a synopsis, you write a query letter, you send it off to them. 99.999% of them say no. A few of them say, okay, yeah, I'll see the whole novel. And then if you're lucky and your timing is right and you happen to click with the person, then they say, all right, yeah, let's work together. And then they send it to a publisher. And then hopefully the timing is right and you're lucky and you click with the person and the acquisitions department says, yes, we think we can make money on this. It's a whole process. It's not the only way to get published or to get your stuff out there. Obviously, a lot of people are self-publishing. We haven't chosen to go that route because if you self-publish, you have to pay for your cover. You have to pay for editing. That's all a lot of money. If you get traditionally published, they pay you for all of that stuff. Also, since we do write for kids predominantly, I say we because I often write with a writing partner. Kids are much less likely to read stuff on a digital device and be buying stuff off of Amazon directly. So they still buy print books. So you want to reach that audience. But yeah, it was really just writing novel after novel and then, sending it out. And then as we're sending stuff out, we're starting to work on the next one because you don't know that this one's going to make it. So we finally got lucky with one of them. We found an agent, 2 novels sold, and then that agent left. And then the agent we ended up with didn't like our next novel. And so we split with that agent, and that novel we kind of gave up on, wrote another novel. That one did not get lucky. So that one's sitting in a shelf. Now my partner has a novel that she's writing on her own. We have another novel we're planning. You just keep doing it. Same as making games, really. Like you got to keep making them, and then hope you get lucky with it.
Yeah.
You can't win the lottery if you never buy a ticket. I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
My attitude the last bunch of years has just been as long as I'm as long as I'm producing work I'm proud of, like at least I'm failing on stuff that I personally feel good about. Eventually maybe we get big again and some of these other novels get picked up too. That's happened to a lot of writers. Like they're 6 books in before one of them blows up and they're like, hey, I've got a trunk full of books. Like, you want to look at them? And yeah, they absolutely do at that point.
So I guess to Jesse's point earlier, how did you learn the process of getting an agent and looking for a publisher and learning what the publisher covers versus what an agent covers versus self-publishing? Like, was all that self-taught, or were there resources that you use that other people would be able to look after if they wanted to, go that authoring route?
Yeah, it's all online, and really the only thing you can just Google all this stuff. There's a good resource called Writer Beware, which gives you a good foundation for what to not get deceived by when it comes to looking for agents. because there are some scammers out there. As long as you have that under your belt, like it's all out there. The agents who are looking are public that they're looking for new writers, and they're public about what they're looking for. A lot of discussions are happening on Twitter. You can find them. So, and one easy way to do it is just see books you like and find out like who represents this writer. That information is going to be public, because if somebody wants to make a movie, that you want them to be able to know who to talk to. So you find that, and then you start looking at those agents, and then that'll open up the whole world of agents and agencies and who's doing what. You can always take a look at Publishers Weekly, see what they have publicly available, or you could pay a little bit to pay for a month or two and actually read some of that stuff. But it's mostly online. It's pretty easy to find the resources if you just search, how do I find an agent? What to look for in an agent? What agents are representing adult science fiction or whatever you're doing.
So you've written a bunch of normal novels and now a visual novel.
Yep.
Which one's easier?
Writing Mission It's Complicated was easier than writing a regular novel, but not because I think writing a visual novel is easier than writing a novel. They're very, very similar and also slightly different beasts. But it's because writing a visual novel forced me to focus almost entirely on dialogue and characters, which turned out to be my strength. What it's not a strength I'd been leaning into up to this point. Certainly through college, I thought it was like a stylist, a very overwrought prose. So writing Mission It's Complicated introduced me to an approach to writing that turned out to come very naturally and very enjoyably to me. So now my short stories and the novels are going to be much more like Mission It's Complicated, much more dialogue based, much more character focused. Wow. Like really getting the narration down to the absolute minimum to set a scene and evoke an emotion. But like, page long descriptions, no, I'm not good at it and I don't enjoy it. Why am I doing it? So it just happened to match up that what I was doing with it is what it turned out I really want to be doing with all my writing.
Oh, very cool. That's great that you could use, creating Mission It's Complicated to, further sharpen your writing. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And a lot of my books, I write science fiction and fantasy, so sometimes you can get caught up in the world building. There was no scope for that here. It was like, no, focus on the characters and their emotional journeys. And I'm like, oh, that's really good, and I like doing that. I should be doing that with my science fiction and fantasy more. Yeah, it was a big learning experience for me that I just really looked into.
Good stuff. So, digging a little bit more into the visual novels, from a little bit of my research, I've seen, and we talked a little bit about this before the stream, that there's a emphasis in diversity and inclusion in visual novels, and I think Mission It's Complicated is a perfect example of that. And with Jesse, you were talking, like you said, that you were talking to some of the old heads of the visual novel, some of the folks who've done it for a little while, and Misha just looking into, well, I haven't really been into visual novels, but now I'm writing one. Do you think that visual novels as a genre, or maybe choice-based narrative as a genre, has been always so welcoming and inclusive, or do you just think with the style of these games that it just welcomes diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I think going back to what I said before, I think anytime something is cheap and relatively easy from a knowledge and from a technical knowledge perspective, and has few gatekeepers, it's going to end up being more diverse and inclusive. The other thing that Mission It's Complicated was really inspired by was fan fiction. In fact, fan fiction is known for having a lot of queer stories. Why? Because it's easy and it's cheap to produce, and there's absolutely no gatekeepers to it. Whereas as soon as people start, as soon as they're going to spend a lot of money on something, as soon as there's publishers, they're starting to worry about, like, is this so diverse that it's no longer viable in the marketplace? Well, fan fiction, the marketplace, it's the marketplace of how many likes do you get. So I think anytime, and just in general, the way game development has become more inclusive has been through cheaper, easier to use technology, right? Like, I think people from diverse backgrounds, whether it's queerness or race or anything like that, like, people have always had to prove that they're a viable market. And until you prove you're a viable market, nobody's willing to give you money, which is a catch-22, and it's frustrating and ridiculous, but that's how it is. But as soon as that stuff gets to be easy for people to make on their own, and they make it, and then they get big, and now suddenly people are interested in it. It's now not marketing people are more excited by it. So it's yeah, that's really what it comes down to. I think. I don't know. Other takes on it, I'm sure.
I think it's kind of, you can look at the history of comic books as partly too, right? I mean, comic books have always been more progressive than TV or movies, or even just published literature, because they just easier to get into. Small print runs, you can be very expressive.
It's easy to make a zine.
Yeah. And visual novels are kind of, if you want to create an interactive story, I guess the absolute easiest way is just to do a straight up text adventure. But that's there's a lot of people who aren't ready to engage with a text adventure, but there's a lot more people who are kind of ready to engage with visual novels digitally. So it's a good way to be expressive.
Again, I say easy. I guess I'm using easy in two different terms. There's technically easy, and there's like like talent-wise, effort-wise easy. Like, it's a lot of effort, but you don't need someone else's money and equipment to do it.
Yeah. I mean, we did. I mean, ours was pretty lush, and it's one of the smallest projects we've ever done. Yeah.
Good deal. Good deal. So, digging a little bit more into Missions Complicated, I wanted to talk about the broad perspective of heroes, and if there was a favorite hero or favorite pairing that everybody else has enjoyed. And with Adam recently completing the game, I'd love to shift it to you. What did you think about the spectrum of heroes, and was there a particular pairing in Missions Complicated? Which, by the way, I don't know if we mentioned this or not, but it is free on itch.io or Steam. So you can go on Steam or itch.io and download the game for free. But Adam, with you completing it, what were your thoughts about the heroes, and was there a particular pairing that you enjoyed?
I think, I mean, kind of like I touched on earlier, like, part of the reason why I finished it so quickly was because I got really attached to the characters. I did think everyone was super unique, and there were some that, like, I was like, oh, I don't know, like, if I'm gonna care for this character very much. And then by the end of their first romance, like, I mean, honestly, like, by the end of their first date, I was like, okay, I'm sold. So I think my favorite pairing was probably, it's really hard because I liked a lot of them, but I really liked Night Gaunt and Riptide's pairing. I think that one was really, really sweet. And there's a lot that was really emotional that happened between them. I'm not gonna, like, talk spoilers either, so like, definitely do it. But like, their journey together was really endearing, and I think they were probably my favorite. But then I think my favorite, like, while they're my favorite pairing, I think my favorite character was probably Zale. And, like, I don't know, everyone, like, every pairing that they were matched up with was also just so interesting. And I don't know, like, just all around, like, the characters were just so solid. So I think that was really fun.
Very cool. Yeah, me personally, I liked Riptide a lot. I thought that he was very fun as a character. I like Night Gaunt because I like to read him like Batman. Just get that super. And we had a couple of influencers or content creators who wanted to read or either read Night Gauntlet like Batman or kind of tricked you like, oh, you thought I was going to read it and did the complete opposite, which is absolutely hilarious. And yeah, favorite pairing. All the heroes were great. In terms of favorite character, I really enjoyed Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that she was fun.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just that they hear the other your other ones. Maybe we'll start. We'll go with Jesse because I know Misha, you wrote them all or most of them, so I don't. You might have a favorite, but I won't put you in a corner just yet.
Let's see. For me, I'd say I think favorite character is probably Night Gauntlet just because it's funny. I've always had my whole life I've had a hard time taking Batman seriously. People always take Batman so seriously, and I'm like, this is such a messed up character. And so seeing kind of like a bit of a funny parody of Batman was fun to see. I think favorite pairing is probably Wi-Fi Zirconia. Just because of the shyness is just so cute. It's just, I don't know, that was fun.
That was like one of the other reasons why like I really think I got so attached to the characters is because like just looking at them visually, like it's like you see Night Gauntlet and you're like, oh, okay, so this is like a Batman parody, but then there's so much like depth to them, you know, like they're so much more than that too. And so idiot, like not trying to say that he's not funny because like absolutely hilarious, but there are still those like such like sincere moments, and it's like, okay, like I don't know, they tackle such real issues as well too. So I think that was another super big strength, not only in the game itself, but also like in writing in general.
Well, I know one thing I'm always fascinated with, storytelling situations where you have a bunch of characters and a lot of the long-term interest comes from interesting ways to cross them up, right? And traditionally that's TV shows are the way to explore that. Like a lot of if you watch, The Simpsons has been trying to go for 20 years, and part of their way it keeps going is they'll say, well, what if we did one that's about Maggie and Mo the bartender, right? And like, okay, what would that relationship be like and why? And they figure it out. And every time you do that, it lends more depth to the characters that you already have. So not only are you doing something fresh, but now you're strengthening everything that you have. And this rarely gets done in games. And so it was sort of, I was part of what was exciting to me about this project, because Misha, I remember early on, it was not unless I'm remembering this wrong, I don't think at the beginning it wasn't the plan that there was going to be a completely connected relationship graph.
No, it was. That was definitely my pitch.
That was your okay. All right. I just remember a time where there was kind of like, well, how are we going to get there? I don't know if this is all going to work.
There was definitely that too.
Yeah. Because I know part of it was. I think originally there were going to be more characters, right?
There were going to be more characters and there were going to be more dates, and we did the math on it, and it was astronomical.
Yeah. No, because that's straight up triangle numbers right there, right? Yeah. Anyway, anyway, yeah. So that was, I know that was part of what I loved about this is I don't think I can point to any other game at all anywhere where you've got a set of characters and it's about exploring all of the relationships between all the characters. So often anything that's even remotely romance based is all about a single character and then potentially exploring relationships with other characters in this just very, very kind of fixed way. So I don't know. I think it's very special.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things I really cared about was making sure that all of the relationships were internally consistent with each other, so that even though the conceit is they don't happen in the same shard of the multiverse, that none of them contradict anything else. No character's story with one pair ever contradicts a different one because they're all the same characters. So you're always learning something new about the characters through their relationships that reflects on whatever your favorite pairing is still. So that was one of my goals.
Got it.
Oh,
Yeah,
I really,
for anyone who cares, here's the formula for how many relationships there will be in a game like this, right? Is right there. Since we have so n being the number of characters, that's how many relationships that there are going to be, and so we have 10 relationships because we have 5 characters.
Yep, with 3 dates each, so it ended up being 30 dates, and that was a lot of content.
Yeah.
that's not even factoring all the different missions too.
Yeah, I think originally we were pitching maybe, I think 7 dates or 5 dates, and like, yeah, we did the math. It was like, oh my god, there's no 7 characters, 5 dates each. That was the initial numbers. It was like, there's no way, never gonna happen.
Yeah. I'll do the math on that right now. Let's see, 7 times 6 is 42, and so that's 21 relationships, and then 5 dates each. No problem. That's
Yeah, if I'd have been given 4 years,
105 dates. You got it right.
right? There's no way. There's no way.
That'll be the sequel. It's called 105 First Dates.
105 first dates. There we go. There you go. You heard it here. Yeah. So, another thing that I thought that was really cool, and one thing is part of the marketing team that I kind of hooked on to, is that a close relationship doesn't have to be romantic. And I think that was something that Mission is Complicated did extremely well. That, with especially too, and one thing I wanted to get to was about just our society and underrepresented communities. That the fact that sometimes people just want to have a friend, and that is just the way that Mission is Complicated did it was just very thoughtful and very refreshing. That not everything has to be romantic, that you have to hook up. So I thought that was really cool too.
Absolutely. I mean, one of that was definitely one of the cool things for me, was seeing those different kinds of relationships, and like oh my gosh, I think it was the Wi-Fi and Riptide relationship was like one of the first ones that I had where it wasn't romantic, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like, I love them. But then like Misha was saying, like it expands. Like, it's like you can imagine this relationship happening at the same time as one of the other ones. So it's like they're still absolutely the same characters. It's just this is their relationship, and then the next is what it would be with someone else.
Yeah, like having the best bud is okay. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I thought that was such a breakthrough in the process. Like, because I remember you guys got to that point where you're like, wait a minute, like, is every character in this game bisexual? What are we doing here exactly? And then this kind of like, well, some of them could be friend relationships. And Anisha, maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but I remember a period where people were kind of like, I don't know, friend relationships, that's going to be kind of boring. But this sort of realization that like, oh, what if you don't know what this relationship's going to be? And now you have some suspense about like, is this romance or not? And that, for me, was like, oh, this makes everything much more interesting.
Yeah, and actually, at least one of the relationships was written as a romantic relationship. This was Night Gaunt and Zale. And then when we play tested it, everyone thought that the romance aspect came out of nowhere in the third date. And we looked at it and we said, well, everyone loves it. They just think the romance comes out of nowhere. And I said, okay, that's fine. We're just going to take that part out and just make them friends.
I low-key ship them.
Yeah, and actually, all that's the friend, the kind of friend aspect of it, sort of, it did come out of, well, we probably want to have some people who are just gay and not bisexual or pansexual in this.
Yeah.
So we said, yeah, I guess we have to write friend relationships. And that just happened to dovetail with some of my personal feelings about how friend relationships are just as complicated, just as emotionally important, and can be just as emotionally challenging as a romantic relationship. Like, I think if you think about it, like, everyone's had to, making new friends is super hard. Breaking up with a friend is just as difficult.
Right.
They're not really as different as you think. So I just sort of said, well, I'm just going to write them the same way, except nobody kisses at the end. And I don't know. I guess it worked. People like it. I certainly liked it. What came out of it. So.
But again, I think it's the thing that's just really novel. The idea of kind of video games exploring the building of a friendship, it's rarely explored. And so it's part of another thing that makes the game special.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, speaking of, I forgot to call out for those watching. If you have a favorite visual novel that you'd like to tell us about, or a favorite mission is complicated pairing that you've played and want to share your experience with that, please do so. We would absolutely love to hear it. So put that in live chat. That would be fantastic. Cool. So going on, we have received on Steam just a lot of really positive reviews about Missions Complicated. There's a score done by this third party called Metacritic, and they kind of compile a lot of the different reviews, and it's considered good whenever you're over, I think 70 or 75, and Missions Complicated is around 91, which is just fantastic. Because one, it's a great game to both of, or what everybody has been talking about. And so one thing that I wanted to ask you, and I think we may have addressed this in the dinner with the devs in February, but just to reiterate, how did the team really approach the different subjects of having such diverse characters in terms of their ethnicity, their sexuality, their mental health? We've gotten a lot of really positive reviews about how the team approached mental health awareness. So if we could just dive a little bit more into that, that'd be great to hear.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So the team was very excited to have a diverse cast, both visually and from a kind of sexuality perspective, sexuality and gender perspective. But the mental health stuff is really just something I put in myself. A lot of it is things that I experience or deal with personally, especially the mental health stuff. That's all straight out of my own head. Part of my, I guess, philosophy or thinking about how to write these kinds of stories. So I think there's a lot of work being done in serious games. It's very interesting and very good and very important. I don't play those games. I already have depression. So when a game is titled like, oh, it's a serious game about depression, I'm like, that's great. I play that game every day, IRL. I don't need to play your version of it. That doesn't mean to say it shouldn't happen, but I don't play them. But I think there's room for having topics of mental health, topics of gender, topics of sexuality be part of a game that is otherwise has a lot of levity in it. Because I don't, when I think of myself as a queer person, when I think of myself as a person with several mental health issues, sometimes it's really dour, but sometimes I'm making a lot of really stupid jokes about it. And a lot of times I'm just going through my day trying not to think about it. So kind of trying to bring that in, like it's a game about superheroes and bad puns. It just happens to feature characters that are very diverse. Their entire life doesn't begin and end at their gender identity, at their sexuality, at their mental health problems. But those things are a part of everything they do every day. It's just, it's not the whole of them. So I guess by mixing in jokes and puns and adventures and sweet moments that have nothing to do with those things, with moments that have everything to do with those things, hopefully I'm painting a broader picture of what the lived experience of diverse people is like. Now, in that list, I didn't mention ethnicity because we didn't do anything very impressive with ethnicity other than having characters of different ethnicities be present, which is good. There's more that probably could have been done. But then you get into the question, am I the right person to do that, right? Like I definitely had thoughts of, Wi-Fi is black. How much do I write her blackness? Am I a person who can write that? Probably not. So whether I made the right decisions, I don't know. I think it's important to have the characters anyway, even when that isn't something that's brought up. But it's certainly something where I think a more diverse writing staff could have probably done more with it. But we had the stuff we had. It was just me and Matt Lucas. So I don't think we had the team to do more with ethnicity than we did. So that's just a part where the game is, I guess, is shallow. Not in a bad way, but it doesn't go as deep as I did say with mental health, where I can pull on my own stuff, or with trans experience, where I was able to pull on my own experience, even though I wasn't even out at the time. But we also, we hired a sensitivity reader to help out with that. And at some point, it just got to be, we had to finish the game. So that's kind of where we landed there. And I think it's very important for us to see more work by, especially in this times, Black creators that both deal with the issues full on in a serious way, but also have tell stories in a more rounded perspective that still has levity in it. We need serious Black games, and we need Black joy in games too. So that's all super important.
Yeah, let me ask you this. So in order to really get something like that right, it sounds like you kind of need a team of writers, right? Because if you're talking about part of the game being about, we're going to have these diversity of perspectives, it sounds like that would be somewhat necessary. How do you feel about a process like that? Because I mean, I know you and Matty D, split up some of the writing on this. What would you think of the process of something like this? Like, let's say this game is a giant success, and everyone's like, "Wow, this is so great! I wish there was 10 characters and 6 dates and all that." And we're like, "Whoa, we're gonna have to really get diverse with this." Do you feel like this could lend itself to, we're gonna have a team of writers and split it up and break it into pieces, or do you think we'd lose something that way?
I think you would have to do it that way, and the challenge would be to not lose something, right? Yeah. I think anytime you're splitting up work that's difficult and creative, you're always going to have the problem of, like, the more people you have, the more you have to try to manage them, the more you have to try to maintain a singular vision. These are all the challenges of having a team of 10 people versus one person, 100 people versus 10 people.
It's a lot like TV writing again, I guess. I mean,
yeah.
And a bunch of writers.
Yeah, and the thing is, TV has proven that you can still have a beautiful singular vision, where having a group of writers, instead of weakening it, instead brought more perspectives and actually lifted up the vision. It's definitely possible. It's hard. It's all hard, but you have to do it. So I think if I was offered, if you were to come to me and say, like, hey, we're gonna make this way bigger, like, do you want to lead a team of writers? I would say, yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be super hard. I can't wait to do it. Let's hire the right people that can all work together. And but the thing is, even though I come from a novel writing background, I have almost always written with a partner. So I love writing with other people. There's challenges involved, but if you do it right, the things you gain are so much better than the risk of losing something. You just have to do it right.
Can you talk a little bit? You mentioned a sensitivity reader that we brought in.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that process? When did you realize, we better do this, and how did that process work?
Yeah, so I'll quickly name drop. May Rude was a sensitivity reader we brought in. She was excellent to work with. Everyone should hire her for this kind of work. She's worked in comics on, I think, Bitch Planet, I think Lumberjanes maybe. That's why we found her on Twitter. And I'm like, wow, those are great past works. Like, yeah, please, do you want to work with us? And she did. The process was excellent. I think there's a lot of misinformation and fear about working with a sensitivity reader. I think a lot of people are afraid that they're going to come in and, like, make you take out good stuff and make you change everything in like this really frustrating way. But that is not how you should approach it. For me, it was always a partnership. Here was someone who had an expertise in something that I didn't know as much about, so they were going to help me make this subject better, right? Like, it's always great to have people who know things help you make your thing better. Part of that was we do a lot of client projects where we have subject matter experts, so I'm used to that kind of attitude. I think that helped a lot. But as long as you come in thinking like, this is a partner, there's somebody who's going to care about this product too, and all they want is to make it better for literally the audience I'm trying to make have a good time. And I think from that, as long as you come into it with that attitude, like, it was it difficult? Yeah, sure. Stuff that I wrote did not work well and had biases I wasn't expecting and would not have played well. Am I glad those things were caught? Yes. Am I super excited that not only were they caught, but that she helped me come up with cooler, better, more fun ways to have the same things happen? Yeah, it was awesome. Somebody was helping me do my work. Like, it was super cool. As far as how the process worked, we exported all the text out. She read it all. She made comments, and then we would go back and forth discussing approaches. And then I would make a change and then send it back to her, and she would say like, "Oh yeah, this looks really good," or she would say like, "Oh, what if we pushed it even further and did this?" And I would say, "Oh, that's really cool." So it was always a discussion. It was always a back and forth. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. So I guess to kind of, yeah, we're at 7 already. Yeah, this flew by. Yeah, so we were going to talk a little bit about just some of the visual novels or choice-based narratives that are out there, and I wanted to talk about how Mission is Complicated kind of fits both, but then, to Jesse's point, but not really, because yeah, it is a visual novel. It is a narrative. You do have choices, and it's kind of in the middle of it. And I just wanted to know if there was one genre or style, Misha, that kind of inspired you to do what Mission is Complicated, worked into. It kind of sounds like it was more visual novel than choice based, but I could be wrong.
Well, actually, I mean, again, I was inspired by fan fiction, which is kind of a meta choice of who do you, like. You can pair up anyone you want and write a story. So that's kind of the freedom I wanted to express in a game. Is like, hey, every pairing is going to work. And then I'm a big fan of Bioware games, so they super inspired me with the romances they had,
Okay.
and in particular, in some of them, one of my favorite things about them has always been the small snippets of interaction between your side characters as opposed to you with the character. Though that part is great, I always like, man, honestly, I just wish I could hear these two characters talk for half an hour. Like, these kind of snippets are so funny. And so that's where I came up with the idea of like, actually, what if it's sometimes more fun to see how other characters bounce off each other rather than me always having to decide every single dialogue choice? Like, maybe that would be a little more exciting and fun. So yeah, my big inspiration was I love what BioWare is doing. What if I took this thing they do a little bit of and did a whole game with that? And those are certainly choice-based games, though not visual novels. So yeah, I guess I was inspired by kind of choice-based things in general.
Very cool. Very cool. Let's see. Yeah, so I guess to kind of wrap things up. So we also had an artist in Schell Games by the name of Greg Merrills, and he worked on a side project with this game called Arcade Spirits. So we'd encourage you to take a look at it. It's been doing great on Steam, and their soundtrack is pretty cool as well. And Greg worked a lot on the art and the soundtrack. Does that sound right? Yeah. So encourage you to take a look at that. Didn't have too much time to go into that, but I guess to end with this one, what would you tell folks who've never played a visual novel or a choice-based narrative and can go around from Adam, Misha to Jesse? If they've never played a visual novel or a choice-based narrative, why should they at least try or consider it?
I think if you've never played a game that's like that, I think I mean, it's fun. I think that the idea of being able to kind of see the different options, because like everyone always imagines, what if, and now's your chance to live that. So in whatever context of the story. So I don't know, seeing all of the different options is very rewarding.
Misha?
Yeah, so I guess I would say, first of all, if you really fall in love with characters in games, visual novels do a lot of character work. And then the other thing is too, if you have liked some story-based games but feel like, yeah, you like BioWare but they're not quite doing what you want, or you like Horizon Zero Dawn but you wish the story was like a little more different. The thing about visual novels is, because a lot of people can make them, there's so much variety that if you want a very specific kind of story, I bet you could find it. Like, do you want a story about time travel in visual novels? Yeah, Steins Gate. It's right there. Like, it's one of the most well-known visual novels from Japan. I bet if you put in whatever you want visual novel into Google, you're gonna find something. So it really caters to a lot of different genres and tastes. And do you want romance? Do you not want any romance? It's there. There's something there for you, which is not always the case with AAA games, because there's less of them and they're more limited in what they do.
Yeah, I guess what I'd say is, like, for people who've never checked them out, they're worth checking out just because of the sort of intimacy you can have with the characters. You end up with a stronger connection than I think you do with traditional fiction, because of the fact that you get to these moments where you're like, well, wait a minute, what should this character do right now? And by guiding that and sort of seeing what happens next and what happens next and what happens next, you just end up feeling kind of a closeness with the characters that is interesting. It's really interesting. It's really different, and when it works, it feels really special.
Yeah, I would probably second that. It's being able to really develop. You're rooting for a character, or for Mission is Complicated. You're rooting for pairs of characters. I know with the pairing with Wi-Fi and Zirconia, you're just like, come on, just get together already, So we were playing in the marketing office. It was probably the loudest that we've ever been, just trying to get these people together. And so I don't think I've had a game experience that really drove that before. So definitely, if you've never tried a visual novel or choice-based narrative, give it a shot. I would recommend your first one to be Mission is Complicated, which is again free on Itch.io and Steam. Tell your friends, tell your family, download it, give it a shot, and tell other people about it, especially leaving a review on it. Thank you so much, Adam, Jesse, Misha, Matt, Jill, for joining us. Again, please like and subscribe to the Schell Games YouTube channel. Share this video with your friends. For those who didn't watch it live, but watch it later, thank you so much for doing so. We really do appreciate that. Catch the whole video and more on our YouTube channel. We have a whole playlist of our Dinner with the Devs. So catch the February one whenever we released Missions Complicated. We have Misha and Maddie D talking about the intricacies of the art, putting the game together, how the team was formed, and losing team members, gaining team members, and how they kept the vision. So that's a really good one to watch as well. And thank you. Be safe, be kind, and we will talk to you next month. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
See you later.
Bye.